Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. There was a bit of a time mishap, so we'll see. It'll probably take a while for some people to jump on. But we're having a chat with Luke. It's been a while. How you doing, Luke?
I'm good, thank you. I think how long have we been doing these shows now, and we still can't work out the time difference. I think it's mainly me, but we agreed on it, and we said Sunday, and obviously I knew what you meant, 7 a.m. your time, but I was just thinking, oh, that's Sunday night for me. So I'm sat here in my dressing gown, just doing nothing, and then I get the text like, "You ready?" Like,
yeah. I know. And my clock's still on Eastern Standard Time, so I got that wrong, and then oh god. But we're here and we're live. Hello, Shari. How you doing? And Lou, Old World, Michigan. Andy, Three Fingers. Wayne, Mish. Oh, Danielle, how you going? I went to New Norcia with Danielle yesterday. Danny, that was pretty cool. That's like this old town out in the middle of nowhere, built by two monks in 1846. And then they basically started stealing the native children. But yeah, so the big Tartarian buildings, and they're just literally in the middle of just nowhere. It's just crazy. So that was fun.
I'd love to see some of these buildings because I've not had a chance myself to see any of this stuff. And obviously I've been doing Tartaria in America, but it's all based on what we can find in documents, you know?
Yep. Well, we can have
I make a bit of a jibe at people. Like, it was only a joke, but some people got very offended by it. In my video, I said, like, you know, when you look at Tartaria in America, a lot of it is like, you know, these buildings are older than they seem, or this town grew faster than it should. You know, it was at like 2,000 inhabitants, and then 10 years later it's at 50,000 kind of thing. And I was like, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be touching that. I'm going to be just going into the documents and finding just any mention whatsoever of Tartary in America, any kind of migrations. I mean, we know that the migrations of Native Americans were from those areas anyway, so officially they are of the same stock. But the general idea officially is they were able to cross over thousands of years ago. Most of them, they say, is via a land bridge, you know, frozen over at the Bering Strait, lower water levels, stuff like that. But they do acknowledge that some people made naval crossings. And you just think, well, if they could do that 5,000 years ago, why couldn't they do that 1,000 years ago?
Well, don't they have proof that the Vikings got there? What was that, like 600 years ago or something? Or no, it must have been longer than that.
Yeah, Leif Erikson is officially considered to be the first European to discover America, which is Newfoundland and Labrador up in Canada, and that was in the 10th century, just before the year about 99 something maybe.
Wow. So,
and we know as well that Greenland was populated after the Vikings had been there by Inuit people. They say, oh, well, the Inuit Canadians, they just decided, oh, we're gonna go live over in Greenland. So they were aware that these Inuit people are moving around, but they'll never say that they are Tatars or Siberians, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, no. Hang on, I'm just looking at. Have you seen Greenland lately?
Have I been there? No, but I did make a video on it a couple of weeks ago. Have you not been watching my videos? I made ancient ruins and canals in Greenland a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, sorry, I did not see that one. I'm a bad boy. So I'm just looking for a map because I think Greenland's moved. Where's there a good picture? Oh my God. It seems very close. Anyway, let me come back. I should be sharing this screen, shouldn't I? Sorry.
That would probably help.
We're getting there. Like, that's not a good one, but Greenland's is very close to. This is like an archipelago off Canada. Can you see that very well? It's not a very good picture. But see how close it is to another landmass here?
Yeah.
Do you remember Greenland being that close to land or out in the ocean by itself?
I personally, I'll tell you, I only started researching Greenland maybe like a year ago at most. So before that, maybe, but
I didn't know Denmark owned Greenland. Well, there you go. But oh yeah, well let's
yeah,
not even
originally the Norwegians and the
oh,
Danes shared it, and then the Norwegian Empire collapsed, and the Danes kept it. So,
oh my God, they've drawn Greenland the same color as the ocean. But anyway, it's very, very close to Canada now, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, let me know what you think.
but I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that the Vikings could do that? So they knew there was land there, but they never went any further south, stuff like that. It's kind of ridiculous to me, anyway.
It is, especially like, yeah, it is because they were trying to expand and stuff. They found the new world, and then what? They just went away again, did they?
Well, and then of course we've got the Welsh. They migrated in about 560 to 570 AD as well. They, you know, you've got stories of King Arthur in the Charters and the Mabinogi talking about the New World. One of his brothers who had sailed over there is called Maddock. He came back with a dark-skinned boy that he said was his son. It's quite interesting because the boy was supposed to actually be like, you know, decently old. He was old enough to talk and like communicate with the king. So it makes me wonder whether it was you know, when you kind of see people adopt a son when they arrive in like a new land and they find like a poor native and they're like, this is my boy now. I feel like it's that because yeah, he wasn't gone long enough, in my opinion, to come back with like an adult or teenage son. But the story is that he comes back with this son and he tells Arthur about this land. And Arthur at first is skeptical. He's like, doesn't sound too good. And he says, we'll talk to this boy. Where would I have found this boy if not in another land? So Arthur starts asking him questions, and the boy answers saying how great America is. So Arthur says, all right, sack it. You know what? Let's get 700 ships together, and we'll go over there.
700.
And yeah, so they make a giant migration, and he's over there for a couple of years, and he finally gets killed by a native. A native boy somehow snuck close enough that he could throw a spear at him, and it mortally wounded him. And he had a kind of mummification ceremony up, I believe it's near Kentucky. But he had this mummification ceremony, and then he was shipped back to England, where he was actually buried.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, in New Norcia, where we went yesterday, one of the monks who started it moved back to Europe, I think, and died. And so they shipped his body back to Australia in the 1880s. Like, how's that even possible by ship? Like 6
Well, I
9
mean,
months.
if they're doing it in the 500s.
Yeah,
but I think it makes sense though, because Egyptians obviously the ones that did the mummification originally, as we know in history. They're kind of the most famous for mummification, and they were doing that thousands of years ago. So why would their descendants, like tribes of Israel that hung around in Sinai for so long, why would they not have known about mummification? And considering the Welsh, the Cymry are supposed to be descendants of the tribes of Israel, they've got all the connections to like the Phoenicians and stuff like that. Why wouldn't the Phoenicians have known about mummification?
That's the only thing I could think of, man. Like, he would have had to have been mummified. That's
Well, they talk about his body being in this sack, and they describe it quite well as being very dried, withered. It's been months that this guy's been. He must have smelt great, but
yeah, I know.
Yeah, and they send him back with some monks who carry him to a cave where he spends some time, because basically Britain at the time was in kind of turmoil, and if they said King Arthur's dead, then every single person that has a right to the throne would have been Game of Thrones style, like, oh, it's time to have a fight. And Arthur's heir, his son, he wasn't old enough to take over the throne yet. So they thought, if we say that Arthur's dead now, everyone's going to try and murder his son. So they kind of kept up the air that, oh no, Arthur, he's having a great time. We heard from him last week.
Style.
Yeah, literally, yeah, shaking his hand like, say hi, Arthur. But yeah, and then once they figured out that he was dead, there was like this gigantic war. Someone else took over for a bit, and then finally the story said that Arthur's son, when he was old enough, got the crown back, and he took his father's body out of this cave where it had been hidden, and went and buried it up on the top of the mountain with his church. So it's all
It's got to be mummified. Yeah, man. It's got to be, right?
I mean, as well, I think it's a great time to bring up the Michigan copper. So we must have spoke about this at some point before. But in Michigan, you've got the float copper mines. And float copper is, as it sounds, it's literally copper that's just chilling there. You walk around and you just find like a gigantic, I'm talking massive, we'll get some pictures up, huge things, right? And the best thing about this Michigan copper is it's so pure, you don't have to smelt it. So you could just take it and straight away work with it. And it's copper.
What?
And something like 90% of all this copper has already been mined, and they don't know by who, because they can't account for any of this copper in the Native American tribes. They can't find it anywhere. And obviously we've had bronze ages all over the place in Europe with copious amounts of bronze, and they don't really know where the copper came from. So there is an idea that possibly the Phoenicians in particular were going over to Michigan and actually mining this stuff, because they have, I think it's something like 1,000 years of straight mining. They've got evidence for 1,000 years of straight mining. And then at some point, I can't remember the exact date when it stops, but at some point in the past couple thousand years, just one day, they all just stopped, just disappeared. You know, they were mining away and then just decided, fuck it, we're going. So obviously something must have happened to wipe them out, or people have theorized they were killed by locals. But I kind of think, well, if that had happened, why wouldn't the locals have carried on mining? Things like that. But
yeah, right. That's pretty interesting. So do we have like copper turning up anywhere else? These are pictures, by the way, everyone. This is a massive hunk of float copper.
Well, the thing is you're supposedly able to identify it as being Michigan copper because, and I don't know how accurate this is, so if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I'm under the impression that it's the only place on Earth you can find copper that has fragments of silver and gold in it, because it's naturally formed with just tiny fragments of silver and gold in it. So if you find copper that has those fragments in, then you know it's come from Michigan or from the Copper County areas.
Okay.
And these pieces, for example, like I couldn't find a backup for this claim, but apparently the Chinese actually bought the biggest piece of this float copper in like the 70s, took it to a museum in China, and now there's just no record of it. But it was the biggest piece, and they just wanted it to take back to China and say we got the biggest piece of copper in the world. But it's absolutely incredible because, like I say, any communities would have just been able to turn up. And there are mines there as well. So not only were they, just taking it from the top, they did have mining for over 1,000 or about 1,000 years. This a community in the Michigan area around Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, all those kind of places, they were definitely mining. And they know that they would use canoes to take it to the mainland. And then they'd have ways of getting it to the coast where it could then be loaded onto bigger ships to then be brought to other places. And there was a ship that wrecked off the coast of Turkey called the Alburum Wreck. And now officially, they don't say that it's Michigan copper, but they say there's copper found aboard. But the conspiracy is, or what people suggest, is that the copper that they found on board this sunken ship near Turkey, this Phoenician sunken ship, was filled with copper that came from Michigan, but they don't want to admit it because that would turn everything on its head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, well, if the Phoenicians were going all the way to Michigan, then essentially they've colonized America. And that would have been before Christ, That's a long time ago. What happened to them? Because they disappeared, like you say. And they can only account for something like 10% of the copper that's gone missing. At most, I think it might even be less. But a huge amount of this copper is just gone. No records, can't find it in the local peoples, and it's just
That's
a mystery.
Crazy. Like what do they say causes this float copper? It looks like it's melted copper, doesn't it?
I'm not actually sure what the scientific explanation is for how it forms. I presume, because this is the answer for everything, glaciation. That's just going to be my guess. Just something to do with glaciation, because that's just always what it is, isn't it? But
it's always, man, always.
The weight of the ice pushed up a load of, or I don't know. No, I'm only joking. But you can easily, if you look up Michigan copper, there's some great articles on it. I think one is, funded by the Michigan County themselves. So it's like an official website where they'll tell you all about this this copper. So it's kind of like it's not a secret, but it's just something that's not really talked about much, which I find really curious.
That sounds like an interesting topic, man. And just float copper. What I mean, that looks looks like someone had a big bell and it just melted, and you just get a big pool of bloody copper sitting there. Weird. Is there anything that you want to share? Do you want the screen? And then I can share something after.
Sure, I will do. Let's see. Is that the correct one? I'm going to hope that this is the correct thing. No, that's not it. There we go. Got it. So can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Right. So I don't know which one of these we'll start with because they're all a bit interesting. But okay, we'll start with the Hecata stuff because this is quite short. So this is something that I found. These two texts here are the same text. So this is the actual book version, which I'll use. But if you want to find it, you can find this version that's online as well. It's from at some point in the 1600s. And, you know, it's very original text, as you see. America being the latest and most accurate description of the New World, containing the original of the inhabitants, etc. Right?
Yeah,
so,
looked at that book.
It is quite interesting, yeah, and it goes into this this theory of, you know, Tartars populating the Americas, and it's this bit here which is really, really cool. So this guy Hecata is, if we look on this document. If we can actually see it, Hecata is the old name for Ogadai, Octai Khan. So it's just, you know, the old name. Oh, and it's disappeared. That's great.
The old name for what? Octai Khan?
Ogadai Khan. He's one of the Mongol Khans. Yeah, so he was
okay.
Yeah, he was the successor to Genghis Khan. So we'll see here, it'll talk about this. It says, here too may be added that Asia has no territory anywhere which may more easily, with numerous colonies, supply America than this part of Tartary, as well for the vastness of the country, which no other can compare, and the increasing of the inhabitants. According to this guy, Michaelan Lithauer, I think that says, there is scarce a city in Tartary that boasted less than 1,000 temples. And to see Genghis Khan, first king of Tartary, about the year 1200 in arms, and his successor Hecata, following his father's bloody footsteps. So he prepared his sons with 3 vast armies. The eldest son, Jachi, marched westward with 30,000 horses. Batho drew with as great an army towards the north. So one's gone west, one's gone north. And the youngest, he goes into the Moors country above Egypt. So presumably that's around like the Nile Delta, Cairo area towards
Libya,
kind of the Morocco
area.
kind of.
Yeah. North Africa.
And maybe the Carthaginian kind of areas. But yeah, so we'll look at this section here. It says, Hecata himself marched victoriously into the North America, subdued great parts of the Persian kingdom, and beat the Turks. So you see, he marched victoriously into the North America. And now this is a guy in the 1200s. And it's just a reference that you can't find anywhere else. For some reason, it just... has he disappeared?
No,
he's back.
I'm still here.
Okay, cool. But yeah, it's one of these things that you just can't get another reference for anywhere else. But it talks about the different tribes, mentions the Hyperborea and the Chimeri and Georgi, Sicoris and stuff like that. I find the Hyperborea really interesting because I've seen other mentions about these people coming from the north and being referred to as Hyperborea. And it kind of makes sense because if they were flowing down from Alaska, you would think of it, you know, especially over the Bering Strait, you would think of them as coming from the Arctic Circle, wouldn't you? You wouldn't realize that they're actually just, you know, coming around.
Oh, okay. So you think they're coming across the Bering Strait, but I mean, how did they know what Hyperborea was?
Well, presumably because they've come from like the north, people have just assumed they've kept coming from further and further north, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like Hyperborea, it wasn't supposed to be known in the 1600s, was it?
Well, possibly not. But I mean, I'm thinking Hyperborea in this reference might be referring to somewhere that's just really far up north of Siberia. So that might be why it showed up as being in the Arctic Circle on older maps. And we have to remember as well, maps were obviously always drawn based on where the North Pole was. And based on all the data that we've got from the 1600s, the North Pole was actually in like Canada. So so this idea that the Hyperborea came from the North Pole might be that they actually were coming from like Greenland and all those areas.
Yeah, it's a theory. I'll give you
because
that.
like you say at the because it's moved, doesn't it? So if the North Pole's in Canada, and then you say, oh, well, these people are coming from these islands in the North Pole, then maybe the islands in the North Pole are those areas that you were showing, right next to Greenland, like Labrador, Newfoundland, all that kind of area. But it's a theory. So there's that anyway.
So this dude who did that's the only mention you can find of him.
Of him particularly going into North America. And it's so random as well. It's just like, oh yeah, he walked into North America, and it doesn't give a reference as to where they've got that from, how, why. And of course it's kind of confusing because it mentioned that he defeated the Persians and the Turks, which makes it sound like he did those things in America. It makes it sound like they're in America and he's gone over there and had a fight with them. I don't think that's the case. I think he probably battled the Persians in Persia and probably battled the Turks in Turkey. But it's still very confusing to wonder why he mentioned North America like that.
It's very confusing. Or maybe he was there and that stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with books, isn't it? I mean, but why would someone go to the trouble of writing people into a book like this for no reason, right? So maybe they've just taken him out of other history and they just missed this one. Who knows? All we know is his story is not our story, right?
There we go. So here's another reference in this. It's talking about Dr. Swinton, who's the author of this stuff, and he basically says, so authors of many parts of the universal history, after stating the different opinions of various authors who have advocated in favor of the dispersed people, the Phoenicians and other Eastern nations, observe that, therefore, the Americans in general were descended from a people who inhabited a country not so far distant from them as Egypt and Phoenicia. One will, as we apprehend, readily admit. So saying it's less likely the Americas have been populated by Phoenicians and Egyptians because, how far away. But on the other hand, no other country can be pitched upon so proper and convenient for this purpose as the northeastern part of Asia, particularly Great Tartary, Siberia, and more especially the peninsula of Kamchatka. That probably was the track through which many Tartarian colonies passed into America and peopled the most considerable part of the New World.
And what year was that?
This is 1851.
But he was writing about the past, obviously, because, actually, Columbus, so we're told, got to, the Caribbean in 1492. So,
yeah,
I'm just thinking, if they got there in the 1600s, there would have been people already there, right? But I mean, I don't think they got to the north of, I don't know. Oh, actually, they would have been up north, wouldn't they, in the 1600s, New Amsterdam and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, there's even more mentions. We've got mentions of Tatars, because at some point in history, basically, a load of people started referring to the Native Americans as Tatars. So this whole thing about them being Indians, it's quite curious. I'm wondering when or where that came from.
The story is that Columbus was trying to find a quick trade route to India, and when he hit America, he thought it was India, so he just called the natives Indians, and that's why the West Indies are in the Caribbean.
That's stupid, because if you actually look at the maps that he was given to go to America, he knew that was America. Like the maps, they knew there was land over there. It's
I
really
agree.
not.
They definitely did. Yeah, that's the story I was
It's
told
a
anyway.
stupid story. It's a stupid story. Again, the only thing that I thought about is it's a possibility is that the Indians, when Tamerlane took over, he took over the northern parts of India and obviously controlled India from that area. And his descendants became known as the Moguls. And Moguls is very similar to Mongol, and it was used interchangeably, incorrectly, but it was used interchangeably for Moguls and Mongols. So I'm wondering if that is a connection that basically technically Moguls or Mongols, and they were technically in India, so there was Indians. And I'm wondering, maybe I'm stretching with that, but it could be a possibility that Tartars, Mongols, Moguls, Indians. It's just you've jumped a few links down the chain. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
but
yeah. It's possible. Yeah.
it's all just
The story of
it's all a bit
America is
nuts.
very convoluted, man, and the peoples and all that kind of. We just can't talk about it. We'll get kicked off YouTube. But there's a big story there, man.
Trust. And this one as well, this is awesome. And this will actually link me into something else. So I can't find the map that I used for my video. So we might have to go on one of my videos and find it, or I might go and click on and find it in a sec. But at the beginning of one of my videos, I showed a map that said Columbus discovered America in J592, is in 1592, which is
Wow.
100 years out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an official map, and it's saying, oh yeah, he discovered it in 1592. And I'm thinking, I think the map was released in 16 to 1700s. So surely they would be aware that they hadn't discovered America only 100 years earlier. But it's curious because this document here says then in 1380, or I-380 as some people say, but 1380, Kublai Khan, supposedly some of his soldiers, as you'll see, in 1380, one of the naval squadrons of the great Tartar conqueror Kublai Khan, which sailed to invade Japan, was wrecked on the western coasts of South America. The shipwrecked mariners thereupon, through some unspecified turn of the wheel of fortune, founded the empire of Peru. We can talk more about that. There's a whole document. Yeah. Basically, supposedly, the Peruvians called them giants because the Tartars had boats that they would bring their war elephants on. And so they had some war elephants because they'd, been supposed to be invading Japan. And the Peruvians supposedly saw them and they thought that they were giants because they didn't understand that they were riders on the back of elephants. They were like, whoa, those are big humans. And apparently they did the same thing with the Spanish on horseback. Apparently they thought the Spanish on horses were one animal, and they thought they were dealing centaurs. With an invasion of Spanish centaurs, which would have been curious. But apparently Kublai Khan, although again, this is what I was going to bring up about it, 1380 is 100 years out, because those events actually happened in 1280. So that is actually, curiously, in the process of making one video, I found two documents that actually got things wrong by exactly 100 years. And I was like, is this a trend? Were these things actually taking place 100 years later than we're being told? I don't know. Because if that's 1380, that would mean that Genghis Khan was actually 1300, not 1200. And that would make sense, though, because then Columbus would have discovered America in 1592, not 1492. And I just thought, well, that's a curious one. So I'm gonna put that on the back burner because it's something that if I come across it more, maybe I could turn it into a video. But for now, that is two independent documents that are claiming things 100 years incorrectly.
And I mean, that's just interesting, just for the narrative we're given about, Kublai Khan. And I wouldn't have never told that he had a navy. I was sort of told they were just, Mongol hoarders, right? Riding around on horseback and attacking villages. But so that's interesting.
In fact, if you want to talk about the just briefly, the idea that they're just, they're just nutcases that ruin everything. So the Pax Mongolica, or the Pax Tartarica, is based on the Pax Romana, which is the cultural expansion that was brought about by the relative peace of the Roman Empire. The mix of all the cultures. When you settle down for 10 minutes and don't have any uprisings, people start enjoying themselves. Literature booms. You start having schools, and that's essentially what these guys did. They came all the places that they took over. It shows them burning cities, but what it doesn't show you is them building schools and hospitals and going, "Here you go, mate, read this," and they brought over loads of works of fiction and stuff, which a lot of them now have been adapted into Western stuff. I can't think of any off the top of my head because most of them are out of date. But if you go to about like the 1800s, a lot of the stories that are being shown in the courts around Europe to all the different kings and queens, they're just westernized versions of Tartar stories. One I can think of is something, the Wild Horse of Tartary or something. That's one of them. It's based on a Tartar king that falls in love with a lower class girl or something, and it's but there's loads of stuff like that. Go on, sorry.
So basically, Kublai Khan was a Tartar king, or they did. What did they call them? Not kings, but what
they call them Khans or Shams. A Khan is essentially a prince, but then they had a Grand Sham, which is your emperor.
You see, that's why Tartarians fell, man. It was just a sham.
Exactly. So, they all have Khans. So there's absolutely loads of Khans, and then you'll have the top Khan. And it wasn't always peaceful. Like I say, it was exactly the same as other empires. If the current emperor is getting old and it's looking like he's not doing a good job, then you're going to get one of the younger princes of some town going, you know what, I think I could run this empire, and it's exactly the same. So people have this idea of Tartaria as being like just world peace. Not at all. There was a lot of war. You had to have a lot of war to get the peace in the first place. So a good example of this is it was said at the height of the Mongol Empire or the Tartarian Empire that a virgin could walk with as in a beautiful young woman virgin with a barrel of gold. She could walk naked through the country and she wouldn't be harassed or by anyone, because the rule of law was so strong that no one would dare do it. And one guy used an example. He said when he was in Tartary, he saw a man that apparently tried to sip some milk from a woman's jug that she was carrying, and the guard sliced his stomach open. But apparently the guard slashed his stomach open right in the middle of the street. And he said that's the way it was, that they were brutal. So if you did anything, they just kill you. So no one would touch anyone because they were so brutal. Is kind of the stories that came out of it.
Wow.
So peace born out of blood, I guess.
Yeah, didn't have any crime at least. We could, that might work in America at the moment and Australia.
Well, you never know. And then, like you say, you get this Pax Mongolica, and these are the guys that essentially made the Silk Road. So they essentially made world trade.
So did they make the Great Wall of China or the Great Wall of Rome?
What, sorry?
The Great Wall of Rome, the Great Wall of China. Have you seen that video where I think Jason and Max and Martin did it, and they show that it's a Roman structure and it was part of it. They think it was part of the Silk Road or was the Silk Road.
That's curious. Huh. Well, I do know that a lot of what we see today as part of the wall is reconstructed quite recently.
Yes.
I do wonder if that's part of like the Catholic mission in China was to Romanize it, because the Catholics did seem to be getting quite powerful in China before the Qing dynasty took over.
Yeah, aren't they still building sections of it?
Well, if you look at most, they're always working on it. Like the bits that people point to say that there's arrow slits on both sides and stuff like that, those are always the modern bits. The oldest bits, some of them are just literally like piles of rubble just for miles and miles and miles. The bits that you see are always they're for tourism. They want people to be coming to China and walking up and down the walls and going, whoa. All the old records obviously say that the Chinese built them to stop the Tatars. Supposedly, around 200 BC, they were just getting sick of the northern people coming in. and they decided, right, we're going to start constructing this absolutely gigantic barricade, and then they just kept working on it. But it kind of became useless anyway in around the 10th century, I guess. It became useless at that point because you had like the Jin dynasty, which were the Jurchens, and like the Khitans and the Lao dynasty, and they all took over northern China anyway. So this wall was just going through the middle of their land, and it was not really useful.
Yeah.
It became useful again with the Ming dynasty when they got away from the Tatars, because for about 150 years they actually managed to get away from the Tatars, and it would have been, I guess, useful then. But then the kings took over and they're back in the empire again. So,
yeah, man, it's pretty impressive construction, though. I will give them that. Whenever, because I mean, it also doesn't appear on maps, does it? Like, if you go back, I think it's even like 500-600 years. There's no Great Wall, which is interesting. And another side bit is Kelly just got back from China.
Oh, nice. Has she been re-educated?
She went and went into the 15-minute cities and got re-educated. But she said there was no people there.
Really?
She said the cities were empty. She said the countryside was empty, no cars on the road. And she said even in one city they were staying there and there was all these like masses of suburbs, but at night time no lights came on.
Wow.
Very
it's
strange.
Was it like a self-imposed kind of lockdown, isn't it?
Well, who knows? Like, another thing is, these ghost cities, the Chinese ghost cities. Have you seen them?
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that. Apparently, the official line is that they just build and build and build, isn't it? But
yeah, well,
it's kind of
that's
weird.
what they say. But now they've got over 7,000 of these ghost cities, and they've got enough housing now built in China to house 3 billion people, and they've only got 1.4 apparently. But then there's actually no people there. So what's going on there?
Maybe they're getting ready for something, mate.
Yeah, right. Because we're sort of getting the image that there's people everywhere in China, but nah.
I'm just finding this quite interesting looking at these different things, because I must have completely blanked on this, but the Mongols established the Yam, which is the first system of communication that connected the Far East and the West. Relay stations were set up every 25 to 30 miles on a horse, average day's journey, on a horse. These stations were introduced by Ogadai Khan in 1234 and supplied fresh horses and fodder, and his brothers further extended this network. So they essentially had the world's first postal system, a highly sophisticated system of communication and travel, made it relatively easy. So you got to remember that on the one hand, these guys are described as just like being absolute barbarians, nomadic barbarians. They come storming in, burning everything, apparently are raping your women, and they're like, hey, do you like the post? Would you like the post? I bet you'd love the post. You're like, what the hell? We're building you a school. Shut up and enjoy it. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing.
It's like a school.
Yeah, literally. It's like, look at them teaching our kids, those bastards. And it's nuts when you see it. Like, it wasn't just that, the Code of Mongol Law, which is the Great Law, which is essentially what I was talking about, which is across the entire of the land. Everything is, under this law, and people obeyed it. If you didn't, you got the king on your ass coming and saying, look, no, we're a civilized people, And I just find it quite crazy that you get this this antithesis in the descriptions. We, like you say, we just imagine the Mongols as being nomadic horsemen bursting in, and you think, well, what did nomadic horsemen have use for a postal system?
Yeah. They didn't have anywhere to send anything because they didn't have a
house. They're always moving. They are the post.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, we are the post. But that's it. Like, it's nuts, isn't it? Oh, well, they never had any actual structures. Well, then why did they need to send anything? It's stupid, isn't it?
It's dumb. A navy, that's crazy. And the other thing I was going to mention before is with the Phoenicians who got to America. the dude in that one road north and one road east or whatever, west, they had horses. Like, what's the deal? Are they supposed to have brought all the horses across the ocean on boats, or do you know?
Well, that's the thing, is that according to these documents, Kublai Khan and this navy, they moved elephants on these ships. That was the point. So Japan was under a failed invasion during this time. So I believe it was about 1274 to 1282 that this invasion took place, which would match that document which I said about 1380. If you take off 100 years, 1280 is perfect. They were sailing all over these warships full of elephants, and somehow I don't know if we've got a map here to visualize it. We probably won't, but somehow they've sailed off course. So they're coming down here to attack here, and they've sailed off course. They got caught in one of the currents that has somehow landed them in Peru, and then obviously they've taken off their elephants. And don't you think though, this matches, because who do we have in the South American cultures? We have somebody called Kukulkan, who is a Kukulkan, right? Think of it, Kublai Khan, Kukulkan. This guy's a serpent deity that appeared from the water. You know, if anyone watches Marvel, you'll see that Kukulkan is basically like the Atlantean people. And don't you think it makes sense to primitive people that if you were getting off a boat, so you've moored your boat a bit offshore, obviously you're not going to beach it, and your men are taking smaller boats, maybe swimming in, you know, and you've got some elephants getting pulled in and everything, aren't you going to be like, whoa, these guys are from the ocean?
Well, they are.
You know what I mean? Well, exactly. They're getting out the water, soaking wet. You'd be like, whoa, where have you guys just come from? And you'd be like, no, don't worry, mate. That's a boat. It brought us from somewhere else. Don't panic. You know what I mean? And they're like, he's lying. He can breathe underwater. And you can see how those stories became, because Quetzalcoatl is exactly the same thing. Quetzalcoatl is supposed to be, you know, some kind of genius person compared to the locals that taught them loads of stuff. He came from a land in the east, which obviously to America, east would be Europe. But what if...
and he was white.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. But we do have white ginger Mongols around the same period. And if people were coming from further up north, if they're coming from the northern regions where there's less sunlight, then it makes sense that they'd be paler anyway.
Yeah,
they're not getting as much of a tan.
They must have had some big boats, man,
to get those elephants on board.
Get those elephants on board. That's interesting. Like 1200s. I wonder if that's how horses originally got to America, because the story is like it's quite late, isn't it? I think they say that. I was at Spanish, the 1600s. Yeah, it would have been the first ones, I guess. But
yeah, the official line is that conquistadors, I think, brought them over. I've been looking into this as well. The America's megafauna, very, very interesting. Like, basically, America had a separate kill-off of like its megafauna in the past 10,000 years, where at some point they just all fucking just dropped. They're like, fuck this. Except for the buffalo. The buffalo just looked around like, yes, mate, no predators. Awesome. And then the humans turned up and they were like, fuck. But aside from that, it is really interesting to think what happened, what changed in America to kill. Because, you know, before there was giant beavers and stuff, like literal giant beavers. There was bears that were like 3 times the size of a human. Like it could just pick you up and eat you. And these were alive 10,000 years ago, and then they just got killed off, and the buffalo is the only thing that remained. And supposedly
the same, but I think we're millions of years ago. But we had giant wombats and koalas and kangaroos, apparently.
Well, I'm just thinking, how metal would the Native Americans have been 10,000 years ago? If you leave your cave and you've got to get past like the giant beavers,
the giant beaver.
You know, can you imagine the dams those things
you got a dam on your head.
Yeah, literally. But that would have been metal, wouldn't it? You know, leaving your house would have been dangerous. We're fine in Europe. We were like, oh, don't worry. All our megafauna died 20,000 years ago.
Yeah, man. It'd been like that show, like Land of the Giants, where we're all just like little and everything else is really big.
For real, yeah. We're the hobbits in Lord of the Rings. That's the thing. We're the hobbits. They're all that's left, and that's us. And I think as well, when you look, people might have heard of Siberia. They found like frozen mammoths that were frozen so fast that the food in their stomach was, you know, undigested, so they were flash frozen, flash frozen. Get you demonetized for that. But yeah, so they were flash frozen, and somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody quite famous, decided that they were going to try and figure out if it was possible to flash freeze these mammoth things. And they got some meat together, and they tried to do it under industrial standards, and they figured out that basically, like, it would have had to be an instantaneous drop within like an hour to literal freezing levels to do this. So it's quite curious what's happened in America, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Great Lakes appeared. They're not that old. Like, something's like, there's big changes going on everywhere, right? California used to be an island. We got that on maps at, you know, 400, 500 years old. So it's crazy. Yeah, I was thinking sloths too. Like, they've still got sloths. They used to have giant sloths, though, didn't they? Oh, they still have giant sloths, but I guess they're not giant.
Oh, when you actually look into the size of the, I can't remember what the bear's called, but it's literally enormous.
Short-faced bear.
Yes, that's the one. Short-faced bear. It's absolutely monstrous. It's a beast.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try and see. There's this book, if anyone wants to find it, it's called, get to the top, A Nation Now Extinct. And it was based on the work of this guy called Samuel Mitchell, Martin Harris, and there's a couple of others. But they're the ones that concluded that the Tartars were the inhabitants. And they go into this quite a bit. So, I mean, it's a whole document. People should definitely kind of read it themselves if they're interested, because it goes really into the stuff. There's quite, you know, a few mentions of Tartars themselves. The general theory that they put forward, sometimes they say there's a few groups, so this one's the difference. You can see this is his threefold interpretation of American Indian origins and history. I think this was Mitchell. Yeah, it is Mitchell's. Right, so the three races that supposedly originally formulated America was Malays, Tartars, and Scandinavians. The Malays are supposed to be a Polynesian people.
Yeah.
Like, as in, like, Malaysians, yeah.
I've heard Filipino, which is pretty close to Malaysia, the Philippines.
Yeah, so it's all Polynesian type. Yeah. And supposedly the Tartars eventually overwhelmed and destroyed the other two races. And bear in mind, by the way, Scandinavians, obviously Viking areas. So we're talking whites, browns, and it's race war. Yeah, so we've literally got the Tartars, the Scandinavians, the Malays, and the Tartars overwhelmed and destroyed the other two over a fairly long period of time. And finally, the final battles of extermination were fought in upstate Western New York, not too far south of Lake Ontario. So they're not too far either from our Copper County. And if these guys were having battles, they must have had weapons, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it makes you wonder whether these people were the ones that were operating those copper mines in Michigan. Very possible.
What date is it? What time period was that?
The for time period. This he doesn't give in this document. I don't think he actually gives a specific date for when this is. I think it's it'll be obviously pre-Columbus, but I'm thinking it must be pre-Native Americans as we consider them, like the Indians and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I presume that's what they're saying, is basically that the Native Americans are the descendants of the Tartars that won.
Oh, they're saying that.
Yeah, so these are the descendants of Tartars that had already come over. And I think there is a chance that they came over much earlier, talking like the 500s, 600s, because there is a chance that those Scandinavians are actually the Welsh. Because the reason that they say they're Scandinavian is based on the fact that they found skulls or skeletons with skulls that were definitely white people based on like the placement of certain bones, definitely white skulls. And they're from the Ohio regions, which is where the Welsh are supposed to be. You even find hill forts in Ohio that match the Welsh hill forts. So I'm thinking that these Tartars were probably the ones that were battling the Welsh, because the Welsh were fighting the natives over there. So it does sound like the Scandinavians were actually probably the Welsh. That would have been King Arthur over there.
Yeah.
So in that case, It'd be around
just
the 500-600s.
I was just thinking, have you read the book? Or I think it's a letter. King Arthur in Hyperborea or in the North Pole, and he's written a letter. He wrote a letter to who was it to? It wasn't John D, but it was one of those kind of names. And I think it ended up having to be dated in like the 14 or 1500s because of who he wrote it to. But there's evidence that King Arthur was up north, like in Hyperborea and stuff.
Well, interestingly, close, right? it does mention Hyperborea just here. It says Mitchell believed that both North and South America has been formerly populated fundamentally by two great races, not only the Hyperborean or inhabitants of the North, but also the Australasian or inhabitants of the South. So the former Tartars, he's saying, are the Hyperboreans, inhabitants of the North.
Australasian, man, that's pretty interesting. I suppose they're calling it, yeah, that's Malay. Yeah, okay, they're calling that, oh, yeah.
If I just see what I was saying before to people. So obviously when we see Hyperborea, if we get a map of Hyperborea, get an image of Hyperborea up, we can see what's usually shown as Hyperborea, like these four things in the center. And we can see Greenland here, which obviously would indicate this is more further north. So this could go against that theory. But what's curious about it is if we see magnetic North Pole. Let's get an image of this. Right, yeah. So there's that. Is that the one that shows its movement? And it's really bad.
Hang on, I'm just looking
up. There we go. Got it. Right. So, oh, it only goes back to the 1900s. Right. See if we can get an image of it. There we go. That's the one. So you can see here that they, based on calculations, that the North Pole in 1590 was about here. So you can actually see from, if we imagine that that's actually the North Pole, maybe the islands are here. Maybe those Hyperborean islands are actually somewhere around here. Because if you were using, the word's escaping me, but that device that they used on boats and stuff to figure out your longitude and latitude. Sextant. No, there's another word for it, but it's one of those things that it's like they'd hold them up and they'd use like the position of a known star and the.
Isn't that a sextant?
Maybe there's another name for it. Maybe, yeah. Tell us in chat. They had a specific one used for a boat as well because. Boats needed a different type that was a bit more simple, but it's how they figured out where. So obviously today we're a bit further now. We're actually the North Pole. What was that?
Astrolab.
I think that's it. I think that's
it. All right.
I think so. But so as you can see, 1590. It's located here. So if we go to the world map, should we get a decent one up? We could see that the North Pole would actually be here. So if you think all their maps should be skewed to thinking north is more over this way, just based on pole data. And naturally things should morph round towards the north. So if they were mapping the coast here, it should naturally curve more this way to them. So maybe that's what we're actually seeing with something like this, but obviously we got Greenland there, so you could disagree with it. But you've got to remember that with it moving around so much, let's say they map Europe, 1200s, they get pretty good at mapping Europe. Well, we don't know how much the pole moved from 1200 to 1500. So when you map Europe, the pole might be over here. And then when he comes to mapping America, the pole might be over here. And then when you come to mapping Asia, the pole might be over here. So when you put those maps together to make your giant map, it's going to be wrong because the poles were in different places at different periods in time when you did the mapping.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there is definitely problems with maps, man. They don't make a lot of sense, do they? So,
well, interestingly then, is it possible that this is the Hyperborean region? This is the Inuit area. These are the ones that would have gone over to Greenland and the Vikings had been there. So Inuit people moved over to Greenland, and they're called the people from the north. So I'm wondering if these Hyperboreans are just Tatars that live up in very North Canada from Alaska.
Yeah.
And it would have
It's
appeared.
a working theory.
Yeah, because they could have come across by boats into Europe, maybe, and been known as Hyperboreans to the Europeans because they've come from far up north.
Because there was a group of people they called Hyperboreans, wasn't there? Were they Greek, around the Greek area? Not the Greek.
Yeah, the Greeks, I think, were the original ones. But the Hyperborea to the Greeks, it was like a mythological land that was just, well, they say mythological, but I presume that's just because they didn't know where it was, and they met some people who were like, oh yeah, we're from really far away, but they don't know how to to translate that to a map. So they were just like, it's just over there, really far, you know.
just yeah, man, just go for the ice.
So I'll stop sharing for a sec. And do you have anything you want to show?
Well, all I've got, I can show New Norcia.
New Norcia.
New Norcia. So I went up here yesterday. Let me get a picture. So this is in WA, obviously, where there's not much. This is one of the buildings. One moment. So this basically built 1846 was the first. It's a Benedictine monk community. It's Australia's only monastic town. And the story is, if I can find Wikipedia, founded 1848 by two monks. A series of colleges were created, blah, blah, blah. But it basically just says, on the 1st of March, 1846, a Benedictine mission to the local UAD Aboriginal people was started 5 kilometers to the north, blah, blah, blah. So these dudes, they're trying to tell us, just walked out, basically. This is less than 20 years after Perth was named a region like the Swan Valley. Less than 20 years, they built. Now, this wasn't the first building. This one, I think they're putting it around 1900, but even then, like, I mean, look at this building, right? It's pretty. This is the first. I think this is the first one they built in the 1840s. Two monks. This is another one of the buildings, which is clearly a castle. That was a boys' school. They're trying to tell us. That's the original building. All the monks.
Really interesting architectural style. What is that style? Someone tell me, because
this one.
On the last one for the fort.
Oh, the castle. That one.
Yeah, because there's just something about it. I notice it quite a bit, like in the Australia.
Yeah, it looks like our government house in Sydney looks almost identical.
Yeah, it's just very interesting. I enjoy it.
And I mean, and this is all on one site. So we've got that. This is the hotel.
Jeez, if you told me that was in like a war-torn South African country, I'd believe you.
It's in the middle
of like a mission from Far Cry, isn't it? Like you're supposed to kill the emperor there.
It's just in the middle of nowhere. Hang on, my screen's frozen again. I'm going to shut this down 1 minute. Where was I? So it's fully, and they've got an art collection as well, which was shipped over from Europe and somehow taken out to this place. So it's just like, this is the interior, like it's all like, you know, very palatial. And apparently this is schools for boarding kids, basically for native children that they'd, you know, gone and acquired.
Incredible for that.
So that's literally it. Like, so these buildings, it's just that's the landscape. There's nothing there.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the house that you'd see like on a slave farm or something in America.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It looks very much like, yeah. One of those.
Yep,
What are they called?
very
Plantation
reminiscent of that.
homes.
Yeah, the plantations. Yeah, very similar.
And it's just. And this is another one. Got our twin towers here. Very low walls, right? The walls, it's on like a sort of soft slope, and as you go down the slope, the walls get taller, which is quite interesting. Graveyard. This is in the chapel, so they've got all this cool artwork everywhere, and it's frozen again. Oh my god!
You're not having good luck with this, are you?
No, this happened last time I tried to do a live, but basically, it's just a very strange story about these monks, and they turn up, and they're there to help the natives, by converting them to Christianity, and of course, they did this, for. Gosh, I think it was closed down in the 70s. And of course, then it all came out that, all that kiddie fiddling stuff was going on. So it was, it was the same old story you hear everywhere. But the difference is just these massive buildings, man, in the middle of nowhere. It's quite crazy. But I'm going to do, I got photos when we went out there. So I'm going to do a bit of a show on that one as well, I think.
That's cool.
So that's my bit of Australia, because Australia's crazy. So yeah, I was Australia, 1788, and we had like built out cities by the 1840s.
Is that when it was, 1788?
1788 is when Cook landed. Wow. Yeah, it was that late, and there was nothing here, they tell us, like nothing. And they didn't know where any of the resources were. So before they started building, or apart from the fact they needed to grow food, right? First, before they think about building cities, but then they've got to make the bricks, right, and the mortar and all this stuff, all get it shipped over, which is a lot of stuff to ship over if you're building a city. So Australians
I wonder if they had any of those houses shipped over like they did with the Americas,
like the ones you buy in a
fabricated homes. Yeah, the fabricated homes being shipped over from Britain was just crazy to me when I saw that.
Yeah, there's some crazy stories, man. It's
like literally, it's like, oh, this guy wanted to go to America, so he wanted to take his house with him. And you're like, what? It's like, yeah, so he just put it on a boat, sailed it over there. It's fine.
Yeah. There's a train station that was in New South Wales, and yeah, they apparently took it apart brick by brick, moved it to another state, and rebuilt it to look the same. It's like, why? Why wouldn't you just
crazy, isn't it? Yeah, build another one or something. Yeah, it's the same story with what's it called? The Crystal Palace. The World's Fair Crystal Palace.
Yeah, the first one. Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we're just gonna take it down and move it, and then when we move it, we're just gonna make it look like kind of completely different.
It's just
same general thing, but yeah, extra towers. Yeah, same building, just.
Like
it always reminds me of. I don't know.
Different ways, right?
I don't know if you ever watched Only Fools and Horses. I
know, but I didn't. I wasn't like a watcher.
All right, so there's one bit where the guy gets an award for having the same broom for like 30 years, and they're saying he's excellent for the environment, and he's like, yes, the same broom for 30 years. It's only had 14 new handles and 7 new heads, and. I feel like that's the same kind of thing in it when they move these buildings. Like, oh, is this the same building? They took it down, moved some things, put it back up with different material, but it's the same building.
It's the same. Yeah, it's only got 99% new bricks and blah blah. It's just, but I mean, the main thing is the ships, right? Like we've all seen the ships that they show us that Columbus was on and that Captain Cook was on. These little ships,
yeah.
Right, but they were transporting all this stuff on them, and in Australia we get they brought over horses and camels and then all this building material. But I haven't looked into ship's logs yet, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to work out with the maths. I know someone's done the maths for people coming into Australia, and it doesn't. There's not enough boats to bring all this.
So, what is the general theory with that then? That basically that there was a community there before the British that the British have taken over. Is that the kind of thing?
There was just natives. There was no civilization at all. They say no.
Well, yeah, nothing. I know that's the official line, but as in, like, what do you think? Do you think that the natives had like towns and cities and stuff, or?
I think personally, I think there was probably white people here.
Really? Yeah.
There was definitely post resets. I don't know if they were in the cities or if one or the other was using them. Well, you have this, obviously we've got the story of the convicts, and a lot of those, escaped right into the bush. So it kind of gives them scope to say, oh well, anyone that we find who's white, oh, it's just an escaped convict. And then we have bush rangers, who again, they're all white and they were running around basically fighting the government, right? It's almost like they could have been natives and like fighting the invaders, right? So it's just nothing matches up with the amount of stuff that's in Australia, like, and the time frame we're given, especially when
you have all the kidnapping of the Aboriginal children and all that stuff.
Exactly, stolen generation, and that's what they did straight away. I mean, they do it everywhere, but yeah, just went straight in for the kids. And like with that place we just looked at, New Norcia, steal the kids and re-educate them, right? And teach them, different histories and get rid of all their stories. And it only takes, 2 generations for their past to be gone.
So I assume New Norcia was founded by the Dutch in some way then?
Well, no, they say Spanish monks.
Okay.
Yeah, they just walked out and just randomly found this spot, and there's nothing about this spot. There's no water near it. It's not on a river or anything. It's just literally, there's no reason to. It's just in the middle of nowhere, man. It's just crazy.
And were the Dutch not there? Because I must say,
the Dutch came in the 1600s, and they
I would have thought,
was it the Delfkin or something, wrecked itself up on the coast of WA, and a few people got stranded and apparently got integrated into the local communities. And but then there was New Holland, but then they didn't want it, man. They rejected us.
Yeah, because I know that in the 1600s, the Dutch owned like a good couple of islands out in Indonesia. They used to use them for the spice trade. Obviously, one of them was nutmeg. That was a very big one back then. It was like, the biggest thing for people to have, and it just made me think, like, surely the Dutch would have had a bit more of a presence in Australia. But
you would think so. I mean, they named it New Holland. And I mean, the Dutch, right? Back at that time, it's Dutch East India Company, right? They were going everywhere, taking over everything.
So I wonder then, possibly, if the Dutch had already set up small towns and the British just turned up like, nope, we're having those, thank you very much. And then go about kidnapping the Aboriginal kids or something.
Or, the Dutch might have just gone, you guys rule that one. We'll just rule you guys, England.
Yeah.
The Dutch is one of those countries with one of those royal families that you don't really hear about much, but when you look into them, they're very powerful family, man.
Really, I've never looked into the Dutch so much. So.
Yeah. I think the one at the moment is it Beatrix, Queen or Princess or Queen Beatrix? Yeah, man. And if you look back in history, man, the Dutch were everywhere.
Oh yeah, for real. Well, I mean, technically. Most of the Scandinavians, I was going to say most of the Scandinavians do have like that kind of same genetic descendants from like the Rus people, probably earlier Scythians anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's just so much we don't know about it, isn't it? Because like you say, we've had the Phoenicians most likely in America. Some people say Tartars in America. Some people say Egyptians in America. We've literally found Phoenician lettering in America. We found Colburn lettering, which is the same thing, Colburn lettering. So we know that at least either the Welsh or the Phoenicians or similar people were definitely there. They're descendants of the Egyptians, so there's no real reason why the Egyptians couldn't have been there too. And then you look into, this, what we've just been seeing, Mitchell saying Polynesians, Tatars, being in, the inhabitants of America and defeating Scandinavians. So that would have been definitely around 500 to 600 AD. And then you've possibly got Ogadai or Kublai Khan coming into, well, it says Ogadai went to North America and Kublai Khan's men landed in South America and founded the Peruvian Empire.
Peru.
So yeah, you've got so many migrations. And again, I can see it happening. Imagine if like these dudes arrived and you're, quite a native people, and they turn up on these giant boats, elephants, swords, everything. You're going to be like, these guys are awesome. They can be our king, sure. And then they would have gone around going, all right, build this, make us a pyramid over there, make that over there. And then they would have been like, yeah, cool, sick, no wonder.
So the Phoenicians, did they build ziggurats, or because they didn't? There's no pyramid. Like, is that the theory? Like that they went there and they built all the megalithic stuff? Is that what you're thinking?
I'm not really sure on the Phoenicians themselves. I think if the boat at the Alborum wreck, if that did have Michigan copper on it, then definitely the Phoenicians were mining copper in Michigan,
North America. Yeah,
it's debatable how much it was colonized, but if they were doing it for 1,000 years, I think it's really unlikely that they wouldn't have colonized. But the temperature around Lake Michigan, I think there's only 4 months of the year where mining is actually suitable because of how cold it gets. And especially back then, when you didn't really have the best protection, it would have probably been a thing where they turned up for 4 months of the year and did like a huge mining effort and then took it all back to Europe. So maybe it was like they turned up, mined it, fought off the locals, and then left and kept going like that for 1,000 years. But you'd imagine them to build some towns, wouldn't you? You'd think like they'd have, they must have had defense.
They'd need like harbors and docks and things, right, to load it on, and roads and
exactly.
Of course.
And they were using, like, say, canoe systems to get it to mainland, and then using the rivers with more canoes to get it to the coast. And that's where supposedly their big boats would have been waiting on the coast. And then, interestingly, where did I see this? There's a drawing. I'll have to find it. It was on one of the stones I was talking about in a recent video. And basically, it's a stone that was found in America, and on it is a boat, definitely a boat drawn. I'll find out which one it is, but you can see it's a boat. And if you look at the boat, it definitely matches a Phoenician boat, like the shape of the Phoenician ship. I'll see if I can find it now. It's one of the, if I can find it on my phone, then I'll get it up on the computer.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the same in Australia. We've got Egyptian hieroglyphs and stuff, and then we've got a link to India too through the language up through to Tamil, so with the natives. So and this is what they're doing at the moment too, right? They're shifting all the populations around.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, everyone's moving at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, everyone's like they're moving North Africa into your region, and we'll see what's happening in America with the border. It's just, even in Australia, they're bringing in different populations. It's just,
and then all the climate change stuff's going to make it worse as well, isn't it? If all the stuff comes true,
we're going to lose. Oh well, come on! It came true 20 years ago, didn't it?
It was, well, they're saying there'll be 1 billion climate refugees, I think, by the year 2050. So that's something like one eighth of the planet apparently is going to have to move to somewhere else in the next 30 years.
Yeah, and I mean, we know it's not climate change, but there might be some kind of earth changes. Not that they tell us, right?
I think it's
they were telling us that islands were going to be disappearing around 20 years ago, around 2000. I remember they were saying like Fiji and all the islands around Australia. Oh no, they'll all be gone. Because they're not very high above sea level. So if it rises like 30 centimeters, you lose all this land. But billionaires keep building their palaces on the beach.
Look at even the past 2,000 years of history, and I think we have like a survivor's bias where, like, especially we haven't really witnessed that much. And to be fair, we've had huge tsunamis in our lifetime that have caused devastation, enormous things. And you think that's nothing compared to what's happened in the past 2,000 years. Most people don't realize that there's a little ice age that took place in like the 14th century for some reason. Yeah. For like 300 years, the planet just thought, "Fuck it, I'm going to get colder," and it caused absolute havoc in Siberia because the climate, the food just collapsed. There's the food chain collapse, and the people around there, and that's probably what led to the fall of northern Tartary, is that all these different Khans basically stopped working together and started saying like, no, I need this, I need that. And they started fighting amongst themselves because they just didn't have the resources, because everything was freezing and dying. And you just think we don't really hear about that, as that sounds like a really bad 300 years.
Yeah,
and then you get things like volcanoes. You know, how many volcanoes do we have in the past 2,000 years that have apparently caused 7 years of darkness? You know what I mean? I think I can think of at least 2 that apparently have caused. Krakatoa is one of them. Apparently 7 years of at least of planetary darkness is caused by, you know, a volcano going off. It doesn't sound very peaceful.
No, well, that's the main thing they're hiding is cyclical resets, right? They used to teach it, but I mean, the evidence is everywhere, but we just get resettled, you know, but they're not always, obviously, you know, realm-wide sort of resets, but there's definitely lots of, you know, mini resets, right? Just to specific areas like, you know, volcanoes and all this kind of stuff. I think
the planet's a lot more unstable than we're led to believe. And like, we live in this kind of like perfect world where nothing really goes wrong, you know, and all it's going to take is for one of those events to happen to us.
This is the thing. We're just between events. And because the events, you know, seem to be over 100 years sort of between them, we're the generation that has never experienced it. So, yeah, exactly. We've never been through anything really big. I mean, you know, obviously we've had, you know, tsunamis and twisters, but nothing huge. So, yeah, we kind of think that we're safe, even though they tell us that, you know, imaginary balls are going to hit us from space and stuff. But, yeah, I think we're just... they've done a good job, right? Like hiding all these resets. Like there wasn't even in the vernacular, you know, 10 years ago. Oh, you've disappeared, man.
It's nuts, isn't it?
Oh,
I'm still trying to find you this stone. I found like a couple, but it's not the one that's got a boat on it. But let's see if we can find America hieroglyphs boat or something. But yeah, if I do find it, I'll bring it back up to you, because it was really interesting that the boat on the tablet really it had the curved tips that just matches a Phoenician ship really well.
Oh, yeah. Like the Viking looking ships.
Yeah, very Viking looking. And yeah, I think, like you say, the evidence that people were in America is there. There's the idea that Columbus discovered it in either 14 or 1592 it's nuts. That's, you know, even that book I had up before said at the beginning about America from the discovery by the Norsemen in the 10th century. So even in, you know, the 1800s, they were well aware that Leif Erikson first discovered America as far as recent Europeans go, and yet they've still got Columbus Day. It's not Erikson Day, you know.
Yeah. Oh, and Columbus isn't even his name, right? What was it? Christoph Column or something like that. Christobel Colon or something.
Yeah.
And he was working for the Queen of Spain anyway. So I mean, the whole story is just, you know, I mean, he was basically out looking for resources, right? And that's what he found. Found people and started cutting their hands off. He was a shocker, man.
Well, anyway, should we call that the end, or?
Yeah, we've been going. I can't believe just looking at the time then, man. That's like an hour and
20. Yeah, almost, it's getting a little bit late for me. 1 a.m. So
it's 1 a.m. for Luke again, falling asleep.
Yeah.
So there you go. Bit of a chat, guys. Tartarian America, and Luke is doing another one on that. You've definitely got one video out, haven't you? Tartarian.
I've done, well, it's one big video, but I've released 2 extra videos that are cuts from it, just, you know, smaller bits, make it more digestible. But if you guys want to go watch it, there's like an hour on this. I go quite deep into a lot of the stuff, and also if as many of you go and subscribe to me as possible, because I'm not far off 20,000, and that's going to be a big one. So
nice. Yeah, all right, let's get Leaky to 20k.
What am I on at the moment? I think I'm on 19,190. So got to get 810 people to subscribe. That'd be, and then we're getting a party going. That'd be nice.
There you go. Oh, and he's promised a live stream party when he hits it as well. All right, we're going to hold you to that. Better be good.
100%.
Better not fall asleep in the middle of it. All right, cool. Thank you. For having me. Thanks for everyone in the chat. We do appreciate you being here. Thanks for your comments, even though we didn't get to that many of them. We love you. So stay awesome. and we will talk to you on the next upload. So catch you. Cheers for that, Luke, and we'll talk to you all. Stay awesome. Bye for now. If I can.